everyone, this is Gretchen from Ascend Smarter Intervention. I just wanted to take a minute to go through all of the sounds we have on our sound deck. So you can see our sound deck right here. There's one side with a cue and the word we use, as well as the other side. And these dots in the corner represent the sounds that we expect our students to know. So A will have two sounds, A and A. Another quick thing to note, we're not going to touch upon every single sound a group of letters or letter can say. We just really focus on the most common letters to help our students succeed. So we have quite a stack to get through, so let's get started. A says A and A. B says B. C says K. D says D. E says E or E. F says F. G says G. H says H. I says I or I. J says J. K says K. L says O. M says M. N says N. O says ah or o. P says p. Q says qu. R says S says s. T says t. U says u or u. V says v. W says w. X says x. Y as a consonant says y. Z says z. CH says ch. SH says sh. TH says th or th. WH says w. So now we're going to go into some blends. BL says bull. CL says coal. FL says full. GL says goal. PL says pull. SL says soul. BR says burr. CR says cur. DR says der. FR says fur. PR says purr. TR says ter. SL says soul. SN says sn. SP says sp. ST says st. SW says sw. ND says nd. NT says nt. SK says sk. MP says mp. ALL says all. ANK says ank. ANG says ang. INK says ink. ING says ing. CK says k. FF says f. LL says oh. SS says s. ZZ says z. TCH says ch. DGE says j. S can say s or z. AR says R. OR says or. ER says IR says UR says Y as a vowel can say I, E, or I. AI says A. AY says A. EE says E. EY says E. OA says O. OE says O. OI says Oi. OY says Oi. OU can say ow or oo. OW can say o or ow. OO can say or oo. EA can say e, a, and eh. AU says aw. AW says aw. And STLE says soul. All right, that was part one. Let's go into part two. So part two will contain our morphology, some more vowel teams, some more complex patterns, and what else? Some roots. So here we go. S as a suffix can say s or z. And these cards also have the meanings on the bottom as well. So I won't go through that, but you can see the meaning. It makes a word plural or conjugates a verb. ES as a suffix says is. ING as a suffix says ing. ED as a suffix says id, d, or t. FUL as a suffix says full. LES as a suffix says lis. ER as a suffix says EST as a suffix says ist. ER as a suffix again says but different meaning here. OR as a suffix says Y as a suffix says e. LY as a suffix says li. ABLE as a suffix says ubble. IBLE as a suffix says ibble. UN as a prefix says un. NON as a prefix says non. MIS as a prefix says miss. DIS as a prefix says dis. IN as a prefix says in. IR as a prefix says ear. RE as a prefix says re. DE as a prefix says D. EM as a prefix says M. EN as a suffix says N. ISH as a suffix says ish. IC as a suffix says ick. NESS as a suffix says ness. TY as a suffix says T. MENT as a suffix says ment. AL as a suffix says O. IVE as a suffix says iv. OUS as a suffix says us. Back to vowel teams. IE says I and E. EI says A and E. UI says oo. UE says you and oo. EW says you and oo. EU says you and oo. IGH says I. EIGH says A. Here are some complex patterns now. So WA says wa. WAR says war. WER says were. QWA says qua. OST says ost. OLD says old. OLT says olt. IND says eind. ILD says ild. TION says shun. SION can say jun or shun. CIAN says shun. TIAN says shun. TURE says chur. CIAL says shul. TIAL says shul. CIOUS says shus. And TIOUS says shus. KN says n. GN also says n. MB says PH says WR says So C, when it's followed by an E, the C will say S. Same when it's followed by an I, the C will say S. And also a Y, the C will say S. Now G, when followed by the same ones, so E, I, and Y, the G will say J. All right, and now we're back to some prefixes, suffixes, and roots. So FORE as a prefix says for. PRE says pre. MID says mid. OVER says over. TRAN says tran. SEMI says semi. ANTI says anti. INTER says inter. SUB says sub. UNDER says under. SUPER says super. ULTRA says ultra. And here are our roots. PHON, fun. AUD, odd. AUTO, auto. BIO, bio. SCRIB, scrib, but it can also be scribe, depending if there's an E at the end. GRAPH, graph. AST, ast. TER, ter. PORT, port. JECT, ject. SENS, sense. SENT, scent. DICT, dict. VOC, voke. PHOTO, photo. SPEC, spec. CENT, scent. BI, by. BENE, bena, or bene. MAL, mal. And that was all of the sounds we teach from our lessons from foundations, our kindergarten, all the way through our secondary, middle school, high school level. I know that was a lot to go through. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out at info@ascendlearningcenter.com.